What caused King Jeb to be so irritated? Why are all of the royals standing outside? Who could they be waiting for? Someone or something? Why does Erionna summon Willow, former Team Dragon Force member, formerly known as YEE? There's so many questions, so many questions. Find out more about this in the final episode I've donned as Omega here on Free Your Mind. Hit it. Folks, here we are. Last week, I said we were reading chapter 7, and that was a bold-faced lie because we were in chapter 6. This is chapter 7, the First Kingdom. That's actually the name of the chapter, the First Kingdom. All right, chapter 7, the First Kingdom. This is our final read. So you must go do your duty and get a copy of this here book, TDF, The Seven Kingdoms. This is book 1 of the Team Dragon Force saga. I am the author, Quentin Hawkins. And now we will begin. Chapter 7, The First Kingdom. Location, capital city, Enosh, the Castle of Christia. The Castle of Christia was the shimmering light of the heavens. It was the holiest of holy places and the center of all of Enosh. 6 separate buildings made up the front of Castle Christia. Upon each shone an Enoshian icon with the insignia of a specific kingdom upon it. There were a representation of each of the Enoshian houses, a welcome sign to the royal council. Not only a welcome, but a warning to others of the protection each house had placed upon it. The center main building, the entrance, bore the sigil of Christia itself, the sigil of Enosh, a representation of the heavens. Capital City, where the pilgrimage took place every year, was just on the other side of the Great Wall. It is said, traveling past the Great Wall and into Inner Enosh, that you always end up at the front door of the holy castle of Christia. The soft green fields and the flowered hills. The soft green fields and flowered hills seem to stretch all around in every direction. Jeb secretly reveled in awe at its beauty. He remembered how much his Karina enjoyed being here. Interacting with the monks or visiting the pyramid-like monasteries was one of the queen's great loves. Karina just adored traveling around with Lady Dragon, Gwen, and the girls to Inya Sebrov, Oramor, and Budami. Her bond with Erionna had been profound, much like Jeb's growing closeness with the Lady Dragon. The fabled great white dragon a magnificent pearl. It wrapped around the Dragon King. Seeing the Dragon King, his hands resting upon his power sword, and all crafted in pearl, it was a true sight. On either side of him were the first, Abraxas, Exego, and Imogen to one side of him, and Ravel, Waii, and Buchan to the other. Here was the only place where they were etched from authentic Dragon Spirit Master gems provided by Source. It was the Camalian King, Alwyn Aberforth Walsh, who had thought of repeating this setup in the other 6 kingdoms. Though they were perfectly sculpted but not in gemstone artists, they don't do these originals any justice. Though he seemed old enough, Jeb knew he had not even been born when these heroes saved Enosh. Tall, ivory, pillar altars were erected along the right and left sides of the castle. Each one erupted with flames of golden yellows and red oranges. It was a sign, as the brothers made their approach, for their carriage to begin to slow. Jeb could see other royal chariots had parked along the roundabout. The flowers here were singing with beauty and seemed to stretch themselves in praise towards the heavens. They finally came to a stop, parked in line with the others. Robert could see the rest of the royal council had gathered at the doors. Like always, they waited patiently for the Master Keeper. Jeb frowned at the lot of them standing around and chumming it up near the castle entry. Seems we were the last to arrive, Robert said to Jeb, sounding annoyingly happy. Robert saw Erionna conversing with his wife Gwen next to the mini-column with a towering thunder dragon statue. It warmed his heart to see how close they were. He was actually surprised that Orion was not there with them. A pondering look came across his face. Robert thought back to the few recent times he'd seen Erionna. At no point was Orion with her then either. As curious as this was to him, he digressed. Suddenly the Eisenhall King popped up on them. Late to the race, Robert, King Damien remarked. Jeb's demeanor soured immediately. He was not surprised at Damien's narcissistic demeanor. He knew this pain in the ass of a man would have veered his ugliness sooner rather than later. It was clear to him that Michael took more so after his mother, taking little to nothing from his father's side. For sure, the Waterstone Master Gem would not have taken to him if he had. Robert smiled at Damien as he continued to approach. Jeb continued to look upon him with disgust. The Nodden King had no plans of tolerating the man. He even noticed that King Damien had abandoned his very pregnant queen just to come and gab at them. The red carpet upon which they stood extended from the castle's entryway. Jeb watched Gemma carefully as she wobbled over it to Erionna and Gwen. King Jasper and his wife Queen Coraline held on to each of her arms, safely guiding her along. "Oh, Gemma, you look like you're going to pop." Erionna embraced her tummy. Gwen was glowing at the sight of her and may have been a bit envious. She thought back to her last childbirth, remembering how magical it was. "She is a trooper," Jasper smiled, moving to hug everyone along the way. Jasper made sure to spread his love, embracing each person he could. For such a tough and rugged man, he was always so joyful. Unbeknownst to him, some had grimaced in response to his tight grip and the roughness of his hands. A worker of the land, King Jasper enjoyed getting dirty. To him, he was no different than his Heroan subjects. He had taught Prince Joseph to be a big believer in community and unity. He had taught Prince Yasip to be a big believer in community and unity, just like him. It was nothing to see both him and Joey toiling together in the gardens of other farmers. Where's Damien? He stopped to look for the father of the unborn child. Finally, he saw him off in the distance talking to Robert. Jeb, holding steadily to his cane, had abandoned their conversation. He was already walking towards the others, leaving his brother to deal with Damien. Jasper noticed the Nodden King had sped up his normally slow pace. It seemed he was determined to put some distance between him and the Eisenhall King. Jasper was no longer involved in the ladies' small talk. He had become focused on the elder king, Jeb, and his sour look. Jasper? Jeb moved past the smiling king. He ignored the heroic king's outstretched hand. The grumpy old king never even bothered to make eye contact. No matter his determination to hurry inside, it was the clucking hens he couldn't get past. The ladies had ceased their conversation and stopped him in his tracks. Oh, Jeb, it's great to see you, Caroline gushed. She was the first to hug him, making a fuss over never seeing him. Even though he frowned in response to their affections, he secretly loved it all. He nodded graciously, his gruff face softening as the other queens joined Caroline. Erionna stayed out of the hug circle, focusing on Robert and Damien instead. She did not understand what the pair could possibly be talking about. The Lady Dragon witnessed Robert smile at Damien, who was deep in story mode. She could only imagine the lies coming out of his mouth. It was a whisper that caused her to look toward the castle entryway. It was just in time, coinciding with seeing King Orion as he exited with the Master Keeper. She smiled slightly, always glad to see her longtime friend. Master Keeper Kleb, Lady Dragon greeted him. She instinctively hugged Orion, ignored any response from Kleb. She instinctively hugged Orion and ignored any response from Kleb. The other ladies, minus Gemma of course, curtsied respectfully to the Master Keeper. Gwen looked back at Robert and Damien, who continued to converse while moving slowly in her direction. Robert caught her looking at him and the Eisenhall King with a discerning eye. He knew she was no fan of Damien. He just gave her a wink, triggering her to smile. Blushing, she just shook her head and rolled her eyes. She never felt like she could ever stay mad or perturbed with Robert for long. Hello, my royal council, and welcome back to the castle of Caristia. Kleb's lively voice greeted them all warmly. He was a true monk, the symbol of purity that all his 6 keepers followed. Dressed in his more ceremonial garb, a pure white robe with a cloak of silver and gold. His white headdress was much the same, but adorned with the 6 master gems. From his neck hung an oversized medallion with the Enoshian holy symbol, the symbol of the heavens. Erionna looked down, smiling briefly. He was barefoot as always, as were most monks she had seen. His keepers were no different. It was a practice that the clergy of keepers and her son Franklin had in common. Erionna remembered when Corinna, always one to speak her mind, had asked the Master Keeper why they were against shoes. Kleb had explained that it was something about the foot-to-soil contact grounding the soul to the garden or something. Seems like the gang's all here, Damien commented. Erionna caught herself shiver at the sound of his voice. He and Robert, had finally joined the rest of them. Robert looked around at the council members. Wait, where are Lord Paxton and Lady Contessa? Gwen covered her face in embarrassment. She didn't understand why Robert always had to be so extra. My husband and his sister are inside, Robert. Orion smiled genuinely at Robert's jesting inquiry before speaking, waiting for you to entertain them with that single wit of yours. Jeb smacked Robert with his cane, making him aware of his stupidity. Robert grabbed his shin and hopped to the side, having forgotten how deadly Jeb was with it. Ow! Robert screamed. Kleb smiled, glad someone was setting Robert right. He rested his hand gently on Jeb's shoulder and started to move past him. Quickly, the Master Keeper removed it, receiving a look of disapproval from the Grumpy King. Orion! Kleb cleared his throat, quickly moving past Jeb. Orion took that as his cue and began to speak to the council. This year, you will be getting a complete tour of our updated facilities. The Apollo Alma, Inyal Sebrov, Buame, and Orimor monks all came together and worked diligently to complete these changes to Castle Christia before time for the pilgrimage. Klep picked up on the introduction from Orion. He looked around at them all with overwhelming excitement. Then we will sit at the High King Donovan's round table for our annual meeting. His look became sterner. More importantly, King Jeb has brought an issue of great importance of Nadin to our attention. He and Erionna then shared a brief connected stare of knowing. With those final words, Kleb motioned for the royals to all follow him inside. Before he could turn to make that first step back down the red carpet, something happened. Phoo, 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 phoo. Ah! Gemma screamed as Kleb fell back and slid across the red carpet. The Council of Kings and Queens stared, some screaming, horrified from the flaming arrows that embedded within Kleb's chest. The Master Keeper grabbed at it, trying to remove it with both hands as blood poured from him. Finally, he just collapsed, losing consciousness. Jasper moved to catch Gemma, who began to faint from the sight of it all. The others began to run for the castle entry as more flaming arrows landed around them. Zoo, zoo, zoo. Tink, tink, foo, 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 foo. Tink, zoo, zoo. Tink, tink. Erionna was fearless, standing her ground as the others evacuated through the doors. She was unsure if the prophecy had begun, but she was completely pissed that someone or something thought they could take advantage of this holy moment. The Lady Dragon began moving in the direction of where the attacks were coming from. Everyone inside, the Queen Mother heard Jasper yell to their peers over the chaos. More arrows came, with some embedding into the ivory pillars. A villainous sound filled the air, causing the royals to duck and scatter as they ran. Pieces and parts of the columns that lined the circle began falling to the ground. They crumbled on impact, smashing into the cobblestone circle. These flaming arrows were landing all around everyone. They were even denting the tops of the carriages, some arrows even penetrating a few. Erionna looked back once more, only to give the Open Knot King orders. Orion, sound the alarm. Call Team Dragon Force. Send out the White Knights. We must defend this holy place. Yep, the Open Knotting King grunted. He grabbed Kleb under the armpits and dragged the Master Keeper past Jasper. On it. Jasper had been focused on guiding Gemma into the castle gently. Since her own husband seemed to lack any concern, Jasper decided to protect the pregnant queen. The heroic king had stopped long enough to let Orion by. Robert quickly grabbed Kleb's legs, helping Orion. Gwyn and the others hurried in passing Kleb while Jeb stayed and walked beside them. He motioned with 2 fingers, still keeping hold of his cane. Robert could hear his brother uttering spellwork to keep the Master Keeper stable. "Everyone, get inside now!" Erionna yelled a final time, her face tense with anger. She began working, uttering forbidden magics. She redirected the arrows that she could, but so many were flying past her. Erionna heard the closing and locking of the castle gates. Satisfied, she took a few deep breaths, taking in the odors of the air. She knew hellfire when she smelled it. The lady dragon extended her arms outward and rose into the air. The wind lifted her gently from the ground, aiding her ascension into the sky. She scanned across the flowery fields towards the hilly high ridges, determined to locate the culprits. Erionna knew wherever there was hellfire, there would be a demon. Off in the distance, she saw a small battalion making its way toward the castle of Christia. It was a fiery figure that stood upon a small 2-wheeled chariot pulled along by a smogedra that caught her eye. She gasped at the realization of who he was. "Spirits of the heavens!" Her eyes widened with surprise. "It cannot be!" She cried out. Flashes of the past came rolling back to her. Painful memories she'd rather forget. "Has the family returned?" she gasped, remembering that day. The day Enosh burned. Wong, 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 wong. The Team Dragon Force alarm. This sound yanked the Lady Dragon back to reality. As if on key, the castle of Christia cried out for its protectors to come to its aid. The White Knights, led by Captain Roger, came storming out of the castle. The 11 White Knights stood in formation, ready for the trouble to show itself. Erionna descended, post-haste, to confront them. "A whole battalion is incoming, Captain," she informed him. She knew they didn't have enough men to defend against the coming attack. "I need you all to fall back." "Beg your pardon?" Captain Roger took offense to her command. "We will defend this holy place to our last breath." A scolding look came across her face. "You will follow orders. Your White Queen demands it." The captain respectfully backed down, quite afraid of the consequences. The Queen Mother continued to give the captain a dirty look as she turned from him. Just then, another wave of flaming arrows were destined inbound. Erionna quickly reacted, magically pausing them in midair. The Lady Dragon aggressively slung them aside, burying their points into the ground. She turned back toward the guards, and Captain Roger could see the anger on her face. "Queen Mother, please, don't deny us this." He began to plead for her to allow them to help, knowing her word was final. Her response was not what the captain wanted to hear. "Stoop, ho, tarug." With a pushing motion of her hands, the guards slipped back a few feet away from her. The captain watched as the Lady Dragon defended them against more fiery arrows. With her hands raised outward on either side of her, Erionna began whispering, conjuring a different spell. "Stellin, coepelap, die, castil, te pescerum en te helig." And with the aid of the holy power that flowed through the Master Gem statues of the Dragon King and the First, she began creating a magical dome that encased the castle. She reinforced her barrier, aggressively repeating her same spell. Stel coepal up die Castile te pesquerem en ter helig. Call for the master of the white mystics, Erionna directed as she stepped backward through the barrier, nearly backing into Captain Roger. Erionna stopped centimeters from him. I need her assistance to ensure this shield stays impenetrable. The Queen Mother turned from him and exited the barrier. Erionna felt it best that she did not deal with Willow face to face, unless it was necessary. She did not wait for him to obey her command, expecting it to be done immediately. Camaal Queen stepped forward, her domed barrier solidifying behind her. Soon the White Mystics would take over and activate the Master Gem statues of the Dragon King and the First to keep it stable. Again, Erionna took to the air, progressing forward towards the enemy. She knew that her Team Dragon Force were on their way. Meanwhile, she had to do everything she could to delay the inevitable arrival of the demon and his mob to the castle's perimeter. Erionna took a deep breath, exhaling out her anxiety. Okay, boys. Time to bring your A game. All right. Well, what we have just read, man, is the beginning, the actual beginning of this secret war that Hiroku has decided to unleash upon Enosh. So far, what we have is Hawk or Casey, Prince Jalen, Princess Gia, experiencing something pretty deep happening out of the blue in the Open Nut Kingdom. They're laying witness to them, to this horde of Hirokus making its way toward its two towers. Meanwhile, in Inner Enosh, in Capital City, the Queen Mother has encountered what she knows to be remnants of the family that fall under this new army of Hirokus called the Horde. She knows something's coming, bigger than what she's seeing now, and she realizes this is just the beginning. The real question is, are you going to continue the story on your own? Or are you going to let it stop here? As you ponder the answer to this question to yourself, join me over on the Author's Corner. Cue the music. All right, folks, welcome back to the Author's Corner. It is bittersweet that the final episode of Free Your Mind, not Kingdom Echoes, which will continue, but this read-along series, Free Your Mind, has come to its end. This is what I like to deem as episode Omega, because it is the last one. And the questions that I asked in the beginning, we found those answers out in the read-along. So question one was, what caused King Jeb to be irritated? And as we know, it was Damien. He has abandoned his wife, who's very pregnant, just to come over to their carriage and just gab. Then I asked, why are all the royals standing outside Castle Christian? Are they waiting for someone or something? And you found out that answer is yes. They were waiting for Master Keeper Kleb and King Orion, who both came out together to greet everyone. Last question, the very last question. Why does Erionna summon Willow? Well, as you know, she was YEE in the original Team Dragon Force. She carried the flame of the fire dragon spirit. Her firestone, which was upon her chest, showed that, signified that 100%. And now that that part of her life is over, she is kind of like the equivalent of Kleb when it comes to mystics. She is a master mystic with her own coven. Like you have the white knights and you have the white mystics. She is the head of the white mystics. And because of this, Erionna is going to need her help to keep Castle Christia safe from the onslaught of the Horde, which is coming her way. Now that we've gotten through that final chapter of Free Your Mind, which is the final chapter of this book, The Seven Kingdoms, that I will be sharing with you, it is time for you to go and get your own copy to finish the story. What happens to Castle Christia? What happens to Inner Enosh, to Capital City? Do Team Dragon Force, do any of them show up to protect her, to protect them? Is she stuck there trying to defend everything on her own? Why won't she let the White Knights help her? Why are they stuck behind that barrier? There's so many questions and so much going on. Will Kleb, Master Keeper Kleb, will he survive? Or has that arrow done so much damage that there's no returning back? There's no turning back to how he was, who he was. Is he doomed? Those are the kind of things you have to read and find out on your own when you get your copy of this book. Somewhere in one of these corners, you will see access to that book, right? As well as a like and subscribe, which is also around here. And it's been a privilege and a blessing to be able to do this and to have you all follow along. For those of you who did, I thank you and appreciate you. And this is not goodbye. This is see you later. Because book 2 is coming out right around the corner. So be ready for it. I've been Quentin, your host. This has been Free Your Mind.